Hello, and welcome. Tonight, we journey back to a world both magnificent and monstrous, the heart of an empire cloaked in smoke and ambition, Victorian London. This is not the London of grand balls and royal parades that you might imagine. No, this is the London of the gutter, the tenement, the factory floor, a city of relentless progress and profound suffering. It was a place where the glow of the gas lamp barely pierced the choking fog, and where survival itself was a daily, hard-won victory. Before we step into this world, if you enjoy our journeys into the past, please take a moment to subscribe to Medieval Nocturnes. Your support allows us to continue exploring these forgotten corners of history. Now, find a comfortable spot. Let the world outside fade away and allow your mind to drift. Our story begins not in a palace, but in a place far more common and far more real. You awaken not to sunlight, but to a persistent, rattling cough from the other side of the room. It's your father, a sound as regular as the morning bells you have yet to hear. You don't open your eyes just yet. Instead, you listen. The quiet shuffling of your siblings, the drip of water from a damp patch on the ceiling, the distant, mournful cry of a street vendor hawking his wares. This symphony of squalor is your alarm clock, a signal that another day of toil has begun. Slowly, you crack open your eyelids. The first thing you see is the grimy, cracked plaster of the ceiling, just a few feet from your face. You are on the floor, on a pile of straw and rags that serves as your bed, a space you share with two of your younger siblings. The room is small, no bigger than a modern walk-in closet, yet it is the entire world for your family of 7. There is no privacy, no personal space, only the constant, oppressive presence of other bodies. The room's meager furnishings are a testament to a life lived on the edge. In one corner stands a single, sagging bed where your parents sleep. A rickety wooden table with 3 legs, propped up by a loose brick, holds a chipped water basin and a lump of lye soap. A single chair, its back broken, leans against a wall, stained dark with years of damp and soot. This is not a home. It is a human warehouse, a space designed for little more than collapsing in exhaustion after a 14-hour workday. Your gaze drifts to the room's only window. It is a small, square pane of glass, so thick with grime that it barely lets in a smear of gray light. It offers no view, only a distorted impression of the brick wall of the building opposite, a mere arm's length away. The window remains shut, not just to keep out the chill, but to hold the city's relentless stench at bay, a battle it always loses. Through the glass, you can hear the rumble of ironclad wheels on cobblestones and the faint, angry shouts from a dispute in the alley below. You push yourself up, the cold from the floorboards seeping instantly through your thin nightshirt. The air itself is heavy, a foul cocktail of unwashed bodies, coal smoke, and the sharp, acidic smell of the chamber pot tucked away in the darkest corner of the room. You have long since learned to breathe shallowly in the mornings, to not inhale too deeply the scent of your own poverty. This room is a cage, and the day outside, with all its dangers, is the only escape. The morning ritual begins, a silent, practiced chaos. You and your siblings dress under the cover of a single, threadbare blanket, a desperate attempt at modesty and warmth. Turns are taken at the wash basin, each person allotted a splash of frigid, murky water to scrub the sleep and soot from their face. Every movement is a careful negotiation of space, a dance to avoid knocking over the precious water or, even worse, the brimming chamber pot. This is the start of your day, a brief, grim prologue to the much larger story of survival that awaits you on the streets. You step out of the tenement doorway, clutching a piece of stale bread that will serve as your breakfast. The transition from the stale air of your room to the street is not a relief, but a shock. You walk directly into a wall of thick, yellow-brown fog, so dense it feels solid. This is the notorious London pea-souper, a poisonous blanket woven from the city's countless coal fires and the damp, cold mist rolling in from the Thames. It's like trying to breathe through a wet woolen sock filled with ash. The world is instantly reduced to a few feet in every direction. The sky, the buildings, the very air itself, all are rendered in a uniform, suffocating gray. You can barely see your own hand in front of your face, let alone the end of the street. A lamppost, its gas flame burning weakly even in the morning, appears as a faint, spectral glow in the gloom. It could just as easily be a phantom, a ghost, haunting this landscape of shadows. The fog is not merely weather, it is an active predator. This isn't the romantic, ethereal mist of novels. It is a chemical stew, formed by the unholy union of industrial emissions and natural river fog. It clings to everything. It seeps into your clothes, your hair, and your lungs with a greasy, persistent dampness. You can taste the soot on your tongue, a bitter, metallic flavor that coats the back of your throat. A deep, hacking cough escapes your lips, but you are not alone. All around you, hidden in the haze, is a chorus of coughs, the city's unofficial anthem. The smell is an assault on the senses, a complex and nauseating perfume. The sharp odor of chimney soot mixes with the damp, earthy scent of the river. The acrid aroma of raw sewage from the overflowing gutters, and the pungent smell of horse manure from the unseen traffic. Somewhere nearby, a vendor is frying fish, adding a greasy, smoky note to the foul bouquet. This miasma gets into everything, branding you with the inescapable scent of urban decay. It is the price of progress, a price paid with every breath you take. Navigating this world is an act of blind faith. You hear the city more than you see it, the clatter of hooves on cobblestone, muffled and dangerously close, the rhythmic cry of a vendor selling watercress, the sudden, sharp curse of a man who has stumbled into an unseen puddle. You shuffle forward, your feet feeling for the edge of the street, your ears straining to detect the approach of a fast-moving cart or carriage that could appear out of the mist without warning. The fog plays tricks on the mind. Shapes loom out of the gray, only to resolve into something mundane. A pile of rubbish, a discarded crate, another person hunched against the cold. The familiar sound of church bells is distorted, seeming to come from all directions at once. At night, the fog becomes even more menacing, swallowing the weak light of the gas lamps and turning the streets into a labyrinth where footpads and cutthroats can operate with impunity, their movements masked by the swirling vapor. This constant, oppressive gloom shapes the character of the city and its people. Londoners develop a particular squint, a pea-souper squint, from constantly straining to see through the murk. Their voices are louder, honed by the need to be heard over the muffled sounds of the city. There is a sense of grim acceptance. No one stops or expresses surprise. They simply pull their collars tighter, lower their heads, and push onward into the gray abyss, their faces etched with a weary resignation. You take a bite of your hard bread, the crust scraping the roof of your mouth. Its flavor is tainted by the soot in the air, a gritty reminder that in Victorian London you cannot simply live. You must consume the city, and in turn, the city consumes you. With your meager breakfast finished, you pull your own thin coat tighter and steel yourself. You have survived the room and the fog. Now you must face the street market, a place of vibrant life and desperate survival. The fog begins to thin as you approach the street market, not disappearing entirely, but pulling back just enough to reveal a scene of chaotic, teeming life. The air, already thick with soot, now becomes a battleground of smells. The scent of roasting nuts and hot gin cuts through the grime, mingling with the less pleasant odors of rotting vegetables. Raw fish laid out on wooden planks, and the damp wool of the crushing crowd. The noise is a constant, overwhelming roar, vendors shouting, children crying, and the relentless haggling of 100 desperate negotiations. Your stomach, still aching from its meager ration of bread, clenches at the sight of the food. But this is not a bounty of fresh produce. The apples are bruised, cleverly polished on one side to catch the eye. The cabbages are wilted, their outer leaves yellowing at the edges. The carrots are caked in mud, piled high in precarious pyramids. You see tubs of butter, suspiciously pale, and jars of jam whose bright, unnatural color hints at additives best left uninvestigated. Everything is for sale, but nothing looks truly wholesome. The vendors themselves are masters of their trade, their faces lined with the same weary resilience as the city itself. A butcher with a blood-stained apron shouts about the quality of his meat pies, holding one aloft for the crowd to see, though he never mentions what kind of meat is inside. An old woman, her voice a raspy whisper, promises the sweetest milk, gesturing to a pail of watery, bluish liquid. They are performers in a daily drama, their stage a rickety wooden cart, their script a series of well-practiced lies and half-truths. You know, as everyone does, that much of what is sold here is a gamble. The bread is often bulked out with chalk or sawdust to make it heavier. The tea leaves are mixed with dust and iron filings, and the rich green pickles get their vibrant color from a wash of copper sulfate, a known poison. The sweets sold to children, glistening in jeweled colors, are sometimes dyed with lead. Every purchase is an act of faith, a desperate hope that this meal won't be the one that leaves you doubled over in agony, or worse. Your eyes are drawn to a man selling hot eels from a steaming pot. The smell is savory and tempting, a promise of warmth and sustenance. Nearby, another vendor offers sheep's trotters, boiled and ready to eat. For a penny, you could buy a meat pie of questionable origin, its crust greasy and its filling a mystery. These are the delicacies of the poor, a fleeting moment of hot food in a cold world. But even a penny is a fortune you do not possess. You can only watch and smell and feel the hunger gnaw at your insides. The crowd jostles you from all sides. You see a woman with a baby wrapped in a thin shawl arguing with a baker over the price of a day-old loaf. You see a young boy, no older than 7, dart through the legs of the crowd, his eyes scanning the ground for a dropped coin or a discarded piece of fruit. There is a shared desperation in the air, a tension that hums just beneath the surface of the market's boisterous energy. Everyone is fighting the same battle against starvation, 1 penny, 1 potato, 1 bruised apple at a time. You stand for a moment amidst the chaos, a ghost in the machine. You are a part of this scene, yet you are separate from it, for you have nothing to offer and nothing to trade. The market is a theater of survival, and you are merely a spectator. The smells of food you cannot afford are a special kind of torture, a reminder of the vast gulf between seeing and having. It is a powerful lesson in the economics of hunger. With a final, lingering look at the steaming food stalls, you turn away. There is no point in torturing yourself further. Your hunger is a cold, hard fact, and it will not be solved by wishing. There is only one thing that can fill your stomach and keep you from returning to the market as a beggar, a job. And so, you melt back into the gray streets, your mind now fixed on the next, most daunting task. Finding work in a city that has too many hands and not enough to give them. Leaving the market behind, you step into the main thoroughfare, and the chaos intensifies. The street is not a smooth, paved surface, but a battlefield of uneven cobblestones, slick with a permanent layer of greasy mud. It's a thick, black, viscous sludge, a foul mixture of dirt, coal dust, horse manure, and the general waste of 1,000,000 people. With every step, your worn-out boots sink slightly, making a sickening pulling sound as you lift them. One wrong move, one misplaced step, and you could be face down in a puddle that hasn't seen clean water in a generation. The traffic is a terrifying, anarchic flow of motion. There are no lanes, no traffic lights, only the law of might makes right. Huge, horse-drawn omnibuses barrel past, their drivers cracking whips and shouting curses, their iron-shod wheels throwing up arcs of filth. Delivery carts piled high with goods rattle by at dangerous speeds, their owners showing no regard for the pedestrians who scatter before them like frightened birds. To cross the street is to take your life in your hands, a frantic dash between moving walls of wood and horseflesh. Down the center of the street runs the gutter, but it is more like an open sewer. This channel carries the city's discarded lifeblood, the contents of chamber pots casually emptied from the windows above, rotting vegetables tossed from kitchens, the runoff from butcher shops and tanneries, and the occasional, heartbreaking sight of a drowned rat or cat. The stench rising from it is overpowering, a constant, foul breath that you can never truly escape. Crossing it requires a leap of faith, a desperate hope that you will land on the other side without slipping into the toxic stream. If you are lucky, the street might have a pavement, a narrow strip of stone that offers the illusion of safety. But it is cracked, uneven, and so crowded with people that it is almost impassable. You are forced to walk with your shoulder brushing against the grimy walls of the buildings, constantly jostled and pushed. Men in top hats, women in fine dresses, and ragged children all share this tiny space, each navigating the human obstacle course with varying degrees of success and patience. More often than not, you are forced back into the treacherous mud of the main road. The street is a living organism, and its inhabitants are as dangerous as the traffic. Sharp-edged pickpockets, known as dippers, move silently through the crowds, their skilled fingers searching for an unguarded pocket or purse. Gangs of street urchins, barefoot and filthy, dart through the chaos, sometimes begging, sometimes stealing, always surviving. Vendors shout their wares from every corner, their voices adding to the cacophony of hooves, wheels, and the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. You see children, some as young as 5 or 6, working as crossing sweepers. Armed with ragged brooms, they stand at the filthiest intersections, offering to sweep a narrow path through the mud for anyone wealthy enough to pay a halfpenny. It is a desperate enterprise, a way to earn a few coins by temporarily clearing a path through the river of grime. You, of course, have no pennies to spare, and must wade through the muck on your own. Every sense is under constant assault. The roar of the crowd, the clatter of iron, the endless shouting, it all merges into a deafening hum. The air is a thick tapestry of smells, from the sour scent of the gin palace on the corner to the coppery temps of a nearby slaughterhouse. You keep your head down, your eyes scanning the ground for hazards, your hands clutching the nothing in your pockets. To survive the streets of London is to be constantly vigilant, to treat every stranger as a potential threat and every step as a calculated risk. You have only traveled a few hundred yards, yet it feels like miles. The energy required just to walk is immense. Your destination is the docks, a place where a strong back might earn a day's wage. But the journey there is a trial in itself, a relentless gauntlet of filth, noise, and danger. And you know, with a sinking feeling, that the docks will not be any kinder. After what feels like an eternity of walking, you arrive at your destination, a monstrous 6-story brick building that seems to blot out the sky. This is a factory. Its tall chimney spews a constant plume of thick black smoke into the already gray air, a dark flag signaling the heart of the industrial machine. The rhythmic, earth-shaking thud of a massive steam engine emanates from within, a sound you can feel in your chest, even from the street. This is where a desperate man might find work if he's lucky, or perhaps unlucky. You are not the only one with this idea. A crowd of gaunt, weary-looking men and women are huddled by the factory's iron gate, their faces a mixture of hope and despair. They are the city's surplus labor, a human queue waiting for the chance to sell their bodies for a day's wage. A large, grim-faced foreman appears, his eyes scanning the crowd with cold indifference. He is not looking for skill or experience. He is looking for backs strong enough to last the day. His finger jabs out, pointing at you and a handful of others. You, and you, the rest of you, be gone. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost buckles your knees, washes over you. It is quickly followed by a cold knot of dread. You have been chosen. You will eat tonight. But first, you must enter the belly of the beast. You are herded through the gate and into the factory proper, the heavy iron door clanging shut behind you like the entrance to a prison. The moment you step inside, the noise hits you like a physical blow. It is a deafening, relentless cacophony of worry, clanking, and grinding from 100 different machines operating at once. The sound is so immense that shouting is impossible. Communication is done through hand signals and nods. The air is thick and difficult to breathe, saturated with cotton dust that clogs your throat and stings your eyes. The only light comes from a few high, grime-covered windows and the flickering gas lamps that cast long, dancing shadows across the room. The factory floor is a forest of iron machinery. Giant looms clatter back and forth, weaving cloth at an incredible speed. Spinning machines, tended by small children who can easily duck under the moving parts, twist raw cotton into thread. Everything is connected by a dizzying network of leather belts and pulleys, all snaking their way back to the giant, hissing steam engine that powers the entire operation. There are no safety guards, no emergency switches, just exposed gears and relentless, unforgiving motion. Your job for the day is simple, monotonous, and brutal. You are tasked with hauling massive baskets of raw cotton from the ground floor to the spinners on the third. Each basket is heavy, digging into your shoulders and straining your back. The stairs are steep and slick with oil. There is no rest. The moment you drop one basket, you must turn around and go back for another. For 12 hours, this is your entire world. The weight on your back, the ache in your muscles, and the deafening roar in your ears. You see the dangers everywhere. A young woman's hair gets caught in a spinning machine, and she is pulled forward with a scream that is instantly swallowed by the noise. A foreman rushes over, cuts her hair free, and shoves her back to her station, bleeding and crying without stopping the machine. A boy slips while cleaning under a loom and loses 2 fingers. No one stops. The work must continue. An injury means you will be cast out, replaced by another hungry soul from the gate before your blood has even dried on the floor. The faces of the other workers are blank masks of exhaustion. They move like automatons, their bodies repeating the same task thousands of times. Their spirits seemingly crushed by the sheer monotony and brutality of it all. You are paid in pennies, barely enough to afford the squalid room you call home and the stale bread you eat. This job is not a path out of poverty. It is a treadmill that keeps you trapped within it, slowly grinding your body down until you are no longer useful, and the day has only just begun. As you haul another heavy basket up the factory stairs, your muscles screaming in protest, your eyes fall upon the smallest workers. All around you, children, some as young as 6 or 7, are part of this industrial dance. Their tiny, nimble fingers make them ideal for tasks that adults cannot do. You watch a small girl, her face smudged with grease, dart underneath a massive, clattering loom to retie a broken thread, a pea-souper. She does this while the machine is still in motion. A moment of hesitation, a single misstep, could cost her an arm, but she moves with a grim, practiced speed. Your mind wanders beyond these factory walls to other children across the city, engaged in work that is just as, if not more, dangerous. You think of the chimney sweeps, the climbing boys. These are children small enough to be forced up into the narrow, winding flues of London's chimneys. They scrape away the thick, cancerous soot with their bare hands and knees, often in complete darkness. They risk getting trapped, suffocated by the ash, or burned by a still hot ember from a recent fire. If they survive, their lungs are permanently scarred. Then there are the matchstick girls, who work in factories dipping wooden splints into white phosphorus. The work pays pennies and seems simple enough, but the phosphorus is a slow-acting poison. It seeps into their bodies, causing a horrific industrial disease known as phossy jaw. It begins as a toothache, then progresses until the jawbone itself glows a sickly green in the dark and begins to rot away, leaving the girls disfigured and in constant agony. You picture the mudlarks down by the River Thames at low tide. When the river exposes its foul-smelling, muddy banks, these children scavenge through the thick, toxic sludge. They wade barefoot through a vile mixture of sewage, industrial waste, and decaying matter, searching for anything they can sell: stray pieces of coal, old nails, scraps of rope, or a lost coin. They emerge at the end of the day soaked, freezing, and often carrying the germs of cholera or typhoid. On every street corner you see them, children selling flowers, their pleas lost in the noise of the traffic. Newsboys shouting headlines about an empire they will never see, their voices already hoarse from the effort. Little girls selling watercress from a basket or roasted chestnuts from a small, smoky brazier. They work long hours, exposed to the elements and the constant threat of thieves or the cruelty of strangers. Their childhood is spent not in a schoolhouse, but on the unforgiving cobblestones. For these children, the concept of childhood as a time of innocence, play, and learning is a fairy tale. It is a luxury reserved for the rich. For the poor, childhood is merely a brief, brutal apprenticeship for a life of hard labor. School is an impossible dream when a family's survival depends on the few extra pennies a child can earn. Work is their present and their only foreseeable future. You look around the factory floor again, at the small, hunched figures moving in the shadows of the great machines. They are not seen as children. They are seen as small, cheap, and replaceable parts in the vast engine of industry. Their coughs are lost in the din, their weariness is ignored, and their stolen youth is the price of the city's progress. The sight fills you with a dull, hollow ache. Your own exhaustion feels heavy, but it is the exhaustion of an adult. The sight of these children, their futures already ground down before they have even begun, adds a different kind of weight to your soul. But there is no time for pity, not even for yourself. The foreman is watching, and your brief pause has not gone unnoticed. He barks an order that you cannot hear but understand perfectly. You turn, hoist another basket, and get back to work. The long hours in the factory wear on, and you notice the women around you. They work with a quiet, grim determination, their movements as practiced and rhythmic as the machines they tend. Many of them perform the same grueling tasks as the men, yet you know they earn a fraction of the wages. Their presence here is just one chapter of their story, for you know that for many, the day's work does not end when they leave the factory gate. A woman's labor in this city is a fire that is never allowed to die down. You think of your own sister, who works as a domestic servant in a wealthy household across town. Her life is a world away from the factory's noise, but it is its own kind of prison. From before dawn until late at night, she is on her feet, scrubbing floors, blacking the hearth, polishing silver, and hauling heavy buckets of coal and water up endless flights of stairs. She sleeps in a cold attic room, eats the leftover scraps from the family's table, and has only one afternoon off a week if she is lucky. Other women become laundresses, a job of relentless, back-breaking toil. You have seen them, working in steamy, sweltering rooms, their arms submerged up to the elbows in tubs of scalding water and harsh lye soap. They scrub clothes on washboards until their knuckles are raw and bleeding. Their hands are permanently red and chapped, and the constant steam fills their lungs, leading to chronic illness. It is a fight against the city's endless filth, a battle waged with soap and steam for a few shillings a week. Many women work from their own crowded tenements, becoming seamstresses or pieceworkers. They are given bundles of cloth to stitch into shirts, gloves, or trousers. They work by the dim light of a candle or a gas lamp, their backs hunched over for hours on end, their eyesight slowly failing. They are paid by the piece, earning a pittance for each finished item. A single dropped stitch or a spot of blood on the fabric from a pricked finger could mean they don't get paid for their work at all. It is a solitary, silent, and desperate existence. For the married women in the factory, the workday is only the first of 2 shifts. After standing for 12 hours amidst the deafening roar of the looms, they will walk home to their single, squalid room and begin their second job. They must cook a meal with what little food they have, clean, mend clothes, and tend to their children. There is no rest, no respite. They are expected to be the moral center of the home, to create a haven of comfort even when they themselves are collapsing from exhaustion. Their options are few, their rights even fewer. They are paid less than men, barred from most skilled trades, and treated as the property of their fathers or husbands. Society demands they be pious, pure, and obedient, yet it places them in situations where those virtues are almost impossible to maintain. When a husband dies, or a factory job is lost, a woman is left with a terrifyingly short path to destitution. And when all other options run out, when there is no work to be had and children are crying from hunger, some women are forced onto the street. It is the final, most desperate gamble, a life of social ruin, disease, and violence, chosen not out of moral failing, but because starvation is the only other alternative. It is the city's darkest secret, a silent, tragic economy that thrives in the shadows of the gaslit alleys. You look again at the women working near you, their faces set in masks of concentration. You see not weakness, but a terrifying strength. They are survivors, weathering a storm that assaults them from all sides, from the factory, from the home, from society itself. Their sacrifices uncounted, and their stories untold. As the day drags on inside the factory, a man working near you is seized by a violent coughing fit. It's not the shallow, dust-induced cough that everyone has, but a deep, gut-wrenching spasm that shakes his entire frame. He leans against his machine, his face pale, and pulls out a ragged handkerchief to cover his mouth. When he draws it away, you see a small, bright red stain. Disease in this city is as common as the fog, and it is a far more efficient killer. You immediately think of tuberculosis, or consumption as it's more commonly known. They call it that because it literally consumes a person from the inside out. It starts with a persistent cough, then comes the fever, the night sweats, and a slow wasting away of the body until the person is little more than a skeleton. It thrives in the damp, overcrowded conditions of the tenements and factories, passing from person to person through a simple cough or a breath of shared air. Everyone knows someone who has it. It is the city's slow plague. Then there is the terror of cholera, a swift and brutal killer that arrives through the water you drink. One day you might feel perfectly fine. The next, you are gripped by violent sickness and purging that drains the life from your body in a matter of hours. Whole streets can be wiped out in a week during an outbreak. The doctors, for the longest time, blamed it on miasma, a bad air or foul smell rising from the river and gutters. They didn't yet understand that the true poison was invisible, swimming in the very water pumps they used every day. And the list goes on. Typhoid fever, which brings a raging fever and delirium, spreading through contaminated food or water. Diphtheria, a particular terror for children, which creates a thick, leathery membrane in the throat that slowly suffocates them. Scarlet fever, smallpox, measles. These are not just childhood ailments. They are potential death sentences in a world without vaccines or antibiotics. Every season brings its own wave of sickness, its own harvest of the weak. These diseases are not a matter of bad luck. They are a direct result of the city's conditions. The lack of proper sanitation is staggering. Human waste from overflowing cesspits seeps into the ground and contaminates the wells. The River Thames, the main source of drinking water for much of the city, is also the main sewer. The air is thick with pollutants, and families are packed so tightly into their homes that a single sick person can infect dozens. The city is a perfect incubator for germs. If you fall ill and cannot afford a doctor, and you most certainly cannot, your options are grim. You might try a homemade herbal remedy or a poultice made of questionable ingredients. Or you might spend a precious penny on a bottle of patent medicine from the chemist. Most of these are useless concoctions of alcohol and herbs, but the most popular of all is laudanum. In this world, health is a fragile, temporary gift. You learn to live with the constant, low-level fear that any stomach cramp could be the start of cholera, any fever the onset of typhoid, any persistent cough the first sign of consumption. Death is not a distant concept. It is a familiar neighbor who walks the streets alongside you, his presence felt in every graveyard you pass and every funeral procession that clatters by. The man in the factory finishes his coughing fit, wipes his mouth, and gets back to his work. He has no choice. To stop working is to admit defeat, to let the illness win. For the poor, the immediate threat of starvation is always more pressing than the creeping threat of disease. You take a shallow breath of the dusty factory air, trying not to think about what you are inhaling, and force your aching body back into the rhythm of your labor. The dust and heat of the factory have settled in your throat, creating an agonizing thirst. Your mouth is dry, your lips feel cracked, and every swallow is a painful effort. Your body craves water, a simple, basic need. But in Victorian London, even something as fundamental as a drink of water is a life-threatening gamble. The very source of the city's life, the River Thames, is also its greatest poison. You picture the river in your mind, not as a majestic waterway, but as a slow-moving brown slurry of filth. It is the city's communal drain. Into it flows the raw, untreated sewage of millions of people, the chemical runoff from tanneries and factories, the blood and offal from slaughterhouses, and the carcasses of dead animals. The river is a thick, murky soup of human and industrial waste, and yet it is from this very source that much of London gets its drinking water. The private water companies, driven by profit, not public health, are to blame. They set up their intake pipes directly in the Thames, showing little concern for the fact that a major sewer outlet might be just a few hundred yards upstream. The water they pump into the city's pipes is often unfiltered, or passed through a rudimentary gravel bed that does little to remove the invisible contaminants. This liquid, teeming with bacteria, is then delivered to the public pumps in your neighborhood. You can clearly visualize the scene at the pump on your street corner. A long queue of women and children waiting patiently with their buckets and jugs. The iron handle of the pump is slick with grime, touched by hundreds of unwashed hands every day. It is a social hub, a place of gossip and community, but it is also a lottery of death. During a cholera outbreak, a single contaminated pump like this one could be the epicenter of an epidemic, spreading disease and devastation through an entire district. The water itself is often a pale, cloudy brown. It has a faint, foul odor and sometimes contains visible specks of matter you try not to identify. You have learned to let the bucket sit for a while, to allow the worst of the sediment to settle at the bottom before you drink. But you know the real danger is what you cannot see. The microscopic organisms that carry cholera and typhoid are invisible, tasteless, and deadly. Every sip is an act of blind trust in a system you know is broken. This is why beer is the drink of choice for so many. The brewing process requires the water to be boiled, an act that unknowingly kills the deadly microbes. Weak, low-alcohol small beer is considered safer than water and is often given to the entire family, including children. Gin, cheap and potent, offers a different kind of escape, a way to forget the thirst, the hunger, and the misery for a few fleeting, fiery moments. You recall the stories of the Great Stink a few years back. In the summer of 1858, the heat was so intense that the level of the Thames dropped, and the exposed banks of sewage baked in the sun. The smell was so overpowering, so monumentally foul, that it brought the city to a standstill. Even the politicians in the Houses of Parliament, with their windows overlooking the river, were forced to flee. It was this unbearable stench, not the death toll from disease, that finally forced them to approve the construction of a modern sewer system. Back in the factory, your gaze falls on a communal bucket of water left for the workers. A greasy film sits on its surface. Another worker, his face slick with sweat, dips a tin cup in and drinks greedily. You watch him, your own throat aching with thirst, but you cannot bring yourself to do it. The fear of what might be lurking in that water is, for now, greater than the agony of your thirst. You swallow hard against the dryness and turn back to your work, another layer of misery added to your day. The foreman barks another order, and the immense effort of your labor brings a fresh wave of sweat to your brow. You think about the pay you will receive for this day of torment, a few pennies. It's enough to buy a loaf of bread and maybe some cheese, but it will never be enough to escape. You see a man stumble, his exhaustion finally getting the better of him. He is instantly fired, shoved out the door without a single coin for his hours of work. You realize how precarious this all is. One injury, one illness, one moment of weakness, and you are back on the street. And it is this thought that leads your mind down darker alleys to the other economy that thrives in London's shadows: crime. You think of the pickpockets, the so-called dippers, who work the crowded markets and thoroughfares. They are ghosts in the crowd, masters of distraction and delicate touch. A slight bump in a jostling queue, a polite apology, and a gentleman's pocket watch or a lady's purse vanishes without a trace. It is a craft, a skill passed down from one generation of street urchins to the next. The risk is immense. If caught, they face the brutal conditions of Newgate Prison or are transported to the penal colonies in Australia. But the reward is a week's wages in a matter of seconds. Then there are the swindlers, who use wits instead of stealth. You have seen them on street corners, the fast-talking men running games of three-card Monte, their hands moving in a blur as they entice gullible onlookers to place a bet they can never win. You have heard of the street vendors who sell watered-down gin, or the butchers who place a heavy thumb on their scales to overcharge for a meager piece of meat. Theirs is a crime of deception, a quiet theft that leaves the victim feeling foolish rather than violated. And what happens to all the stolen goods? They flow into the hands of the fences. A fence might be a pawnshop owner, a seemingly legitimate publican, or an old woman running a grimy curiosity shop. They are the essential middlemen of the criminal world, buying stolen watches, silk handkerchiefs, and silver spoons for a fraction of their worth, no questions asked. They melt down the silver, remove the engravings, and resell the items, turning a thief's risk into their own safe, steady profit. For those with more nerve, there is burglary, the cracksman who moves by night, slipping through an unlocked window or prying open a warehouse door. The docks, with their vast storerooms full of tea, spices, and tobacco from across the empire, are a prime target. The risk is far greater. A confrontation with a night watchman or a constable with a heavy truncheon could end in a cracked skull, but a successful haul could feed a family for a month. The police force, still a relatively new institution, does its best to keep order, but they are hopelessly outnumbered and underpaid. The bobbies, as they are called, patrol the streets, but they are often 2 steps behind the city's cleverest criminals. And it is a well-known secret that the right officer, in the right part of town, can be persuaded to look the other way for a small bribe. The law exists, but like everything else in London, its application is often a matter of wealth and influence. You know that for many, crime is not a moral failing, but an economic decision. When faced with the certainty of starvation versus the mere possibility of getting caught, the choice becomes terrifyingly simple. Morality is a luxury that cannot be afforded when your children are crying from hunger. In the grim calculus of survival, crime is just another form of work, one with different risks and, sometimes, better pay. A sudden shout from the foreman snaps you back to the present. You shake the thoughts from your head. Today, you are an honest worker. Today, you have chosen the slow grind of the factory over the quick gamble of the street. But as you lift your next heavy load, a cold understanding settles in your heart. The line between your life and a criminal's is perilously thin, and it would only take one small push to cross it. A sharp, stabbing pain shoots through your lower back as you hoist another basket of cotton. You pause for a second, straightening up, your breath catching in your throat. It is just a muscle spasm, a protest from a body pushed too far, but it sends a jolt of fear through you. What if it were something worse? What if you fell, or a machine caught your arm? In Victorian London, a serious injury is a death sentence, not just from the wound itself, but from the terrifying world of medicine that awaits you. For an ache or a cough, your first stop would not be a doctor, but the local chemist. You picture the dark, cluttered shop, its shelves lined with glass jars of mysterious powders and brightly colored liquids. Here, the cure for almost every ailment, from a toothache to a fever to simple despair, comes in a small bottle, laudanum. This tincture of opium and alcohol is cheap, legal, and frighteningly effective at silencing pain. It will not heal you, but it will make you forget you are sick, wrapping you in a dull, drowsy haze. For many of the city's poor, it is the only relief they can afford. If your problem is more severe, a deep cut, a broken bone, a rotting tooth, you might seek out a barber surgeon. This is a man who is as skilled with a saw as he is with a razor. In a small, often grimy room, he will set your bones, pull your teeth with a pair of pliers, or even amputate a gangrenous limb. There is no anesthesia to spare you from the agony. You are simply given a leather strap or a stick to bite down on while his saw grinds through your bone. His instruments are wiped clean on a dirty rag, not sterilized, meaning the risk of infection is immense. This is a world away from the care the wealthy receive. A proper physician would be called to their home, a man in a fine coat who would speak in Latin and stroke his chin thoughtfully. But even his methods are a dangerous guessing game. He might diagnose an imbalance in your humors and prescribe bloodletting, applying leeches to your skin to suck out the bad blood. He might cover you in mustard plasters to draw out the fever, or recommend a change of air, a luxury as unattainable to you as a trip to the moon. And you would avoid the hospital at all costs. The great hospitals of London are not seen as places of healing, but as gateways to the grave. They are overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and rife with infection. Surgeons, considered gentlemen, operate in their street clothes, moving from one patient to the next without washing their hands. The very air seems thick with disease, and it is common to survive a surgery only to die a week later from a mysterious fever contracted within the hospital's walls. The idea that tiny, invisible germs cause disease is still a radical and often mocked theory. Most learned men still believe in miasma, the idea that illness is spread by foul-smelling air. The pioneering work on antiseptics by men like Joseph Lister is only just beginning, and the simple act of a surgeon washing his hands is seen as a strange, unnecessary eccentricity. Your chances of survival are often better if you are left alone than if you are subjected to a doctor's care. For women, the act of childbirth is one of the most dangerous moments of their lives. A fever contracted during or after delivery is terrifyingly common and almost always fatal. Doctors and midwives move from one birth to the next without proper hygiene, unknowingly carrying the seeds of death from one mother to another. To bring a new life into the world is to stand at the edge of your own grave. You rub your aching back, the sharp pain slowly subsiding into a dull throb. You are lucky. It is nothing. But you know that in this city, the cure can be just as deadly as the disease. The only real medical strategy for the poor is to endure. You push the fear and the pain aside, bend your knees, and get back to work. You cannot afford to stop. A loud, clanging bell finally rings through the factory, a sound more beautiful than any church choir. It is the signal for the end of your 12-hour shift. The great machines slowly grind to a halt, their deafening roar replaced by a strange, ringing silence that feels almost as loud. For a moment, no one moves, as if the sudden stillness is too shocking to comprehend. Then, slowly, a collective sigh seems to pass through the room as hundreds of exhausted bodies begin the slow shuffle towards the exit. You join the gray, silent river of workers pouring out of the factory gate. There is no chatter, no laughter, just the sound of weary footsteps on the cobblestones. At the paymaster's window, a few coins are pressed into your grimy hand, your earnings for a day of back-breaking labor. It is not much, but it is the difference between eating tomorrow and starving. You clutch the coins tightly in your pocket, their metallic weight, a small, cold comfort. The sun has set, though in London it feels less like a sunset and more like the sky has simply given up, collapsing from gray into a deeper, bruised purple-black. The gas lamps are being lit by lamplighters with long poles, their flames sputtering to life one by one. They do not illuminate the city. They merely make the darkness visible, casting long, distorted shadows that dance and twist like ghostly figures. The air grows colder, and the ever-present fog seems to thicken, coiling through the streets like a living thing. The character of the street changes completely at night. The daytime crowds of shoppers and merchants have vanished, replaced by a sparser, more threatening population. This is the hour of the footpad and the cutthroat, muggers who use the deep shadows of the alleys to their advantage. To walk home alone is to be a target. You pull your thin coat tighter, lower your head, and walk with a purpose, your eyes darting into the darkness, your ears straining for the sound of following footsteps. Your route takes you away from the main thoroughfares and into a labyrinth of narrow, winding back alleys. Here, the gaslight does not reach. You navigate by memory and the faint glow spilling from tenement windows. The stench of refuse is stronger here, piled high in the corners. You hear the scuttling of rats in the shadows and the constant drip of unseen water from the walls above. Every dark doorway is a potential hiding place, every corner a potential ambush. You hold your breath and walk faster. You pass a gin palace, its brightly lit doorway spilling a wave of noise and sickly sweet alcoholic vapor onto the street. Inside, you see faces flushed with drink, hear loud, slurred singing, and the sharp crack of a glass breaking, followed by an angry shout. For some, this is an escape, a brief, warm respite from the cold misery of their lives. For others, it is the source of ruin, where a week's wages can disappear in a single night of drunken folly. You hurry past, avoiding the gaze of the men who stumble out into the alley. Finally, you see it, the familiar, dilapidated shape of your tenement building. A wave of exhaustion, so profound it is almost painful, washes over you. You have made it. You have survived the factory, and you have survived the journey home. You place a hand on the grimy wall of the building, steadying yourself for a moment before facing the final challenge of the day, the long climb up the dark, creaking stairs. You push open the heavy door and step into the darkness of the entryway. The day's battle is over, but the war for survival is endless. You must now return to your single, crowded room, where a fitful, dreamless sleep awaits. It is the only rest you will get before the bell rings again and the entire cycle repeats itself, without change, without end. You place your hand on the splintered railing and begin the slow ascent up the tenement stairs. Each step groans under your weight, a weary complaint that echoes throughout the building. The air in the stairwell is stale and layered with the smells of a dozen other families living in close quarters. The scent of boiled cabbage from one floor, an infant's cry from another, and the low murmur of an argument behind a closed door. This building is a hive of human misery, and you are just one of its many drones returning to the cell. You reach your door and push it open. The room is filled with a dim, flickering light from a single tallow candle sitting on the table, its weak flame casting huge dancing shadows that make the small space seem even more confined and mysterious. Your family is already gathered inside. Your mother looks up from the hearth where she is stirring a small pot, her face etched with a fatigue that mirrors your own. Your father sits silently on the lone chair, his eyes closed, though you know he is not asleep, merely lost in the depths of his own exhaustion. The evening meal is a quiet, somber affair. Your mother ladles a thin, watery broth into chipped bowls. It is made from a few scavenged vegetables and perhaps a bone, boiled for hours to extract every last bit of flavor. You are also given a small piece of the bread you bought with your wages. You eat slowly, savoring every mouthful, because you know it is all you will get. There is little conversation. The day has drained every one of the energy required for words. The only sounds are the scraping of spoons against bowls and the hiss of the fire. The fireplace itself offers little comfort. It burns cheap, dirty coal that gives off more smoke than heat, filling the room with a fine layer of soot and a sharp, acrid smell. The meager warmth it provides barely reaches the corners of the room, which remain damp and cold. Still, the family huddles near it, drawn to the small patch of flickering orange light, as if it were the sun itself. It is a primal, desperate need for warmth in a world that is relentlessly cold. As the evening wears on, there is no entertainment to distract from the day's hardship. Your mother takes up her sewing, her needle flashing in the candlelight as she mends a tear in your brother's shirt. The younger children are already asleep, huddled together in a pile of rags in the corner, their small bodies a tangle of limbs. You sit on the floor, leaning your aching back against the wall, and simply stare into the fire, your mind blessedly empty for a few precious moments. Preparing for sleep is a simple, grim routine. There is no bathroom, no running water for washing. You might take a corner of a rag, dip it in the cold, murky water left in the basin, and wipe the worst of the factory grime from your face and hands. You do not own nightclothes. You will sleep in your undergarments, their rough fabric, a constant reminder of the day's labor. You add your thin coat to the pile of blankets on the floor to provide a little extra warmth against the night's chill. You finally lie down on your straw pallet, fitting yourself in between your sleeping siblings. The close proximity is not for comfort, but for survival. A way to share body heat against the creeping cold that seeps in through the walls. You can feel your brother's every twitch, hear your sister's soft, wheezing breath. The thin walls do little to block out the sounds from the rest of the building or the street below. Exhaustion presses down on you like a physical weight, but true, restorative sleep is a luxury. Your mind replays the deafening noise of the factory. Your muscles still ache from the strain, and the cold from the floorboards seems to seep into your very bones. This is not rest. It is merely a brief, troubled pause in an endless cycle of toil. And as you drift off, you know that in just a few short hours, it will all begin again. Lying on the hard floor, you stare into the darkness, listening. The city is never truly silent. The distant rumble of a late-night cart, the mournful whistle of a train, the sudden burst of laughter from the pub down the street, it all filters through the thin walls. You would think a city this cruel would grind all humanity out of its people, leaving only a desperate, selfish struggle for survival. And while there is much of that, sometimes, in the bleakest corners, you witness something else, a flicker of kindness. It is never a grand gesture. It is small, quiet, and born of shared desperation. You remember seeing a neighbor whose own children were thin and pale give a piece of her own meager loaf of bread to the widow next door who had nothing. There was no expectation of thanks, just a silent nod of understanding. You have seen families share a bucket of coal on the coldest nights, knowing that a shared fire is better than to dying ones. The tenement building itself, for all its misery, fosters a strange, enforced community. The women watch over each other's children when one has to run an errand. News travels fast. Which factory is hiring? Which landlord is being lenient? Which shopkeeper is selling tainted meat? It is a network of whispers and warnings, a fragile web of information that helps everyone navigate the treacherous currents of the city. To be completely alone in this world is to be utterly lost. Even the rowdy gin palace, a place of ruin for so many, can serve as a sanctuary. On a bitter winter's night, its steamy, crowded interior offers warmth that a tenement hearth cannot. For the price of a cheap glass of gin or watery ale, you can sit for an hour, listen to a song, and feel the simple human comfort of being in a crowd. It is a place where sorrows are drowned, but also where friendships are forged, and a sense of belonging is found, however fleeting. And sometimes there are moments of unexpected joy. A street performer playing a lively tune on a fiddle, drawing a small crowd that claps along, their weary faces briefly illuminated with smiles. An organ grinder with a sad-eyed monkey in a tiny red coat, collecting halfpennies from delighted children. The storytellers selling their penny dreadfuls, cheap, sensational pamphlets filled with tales of crime and adventure, offering a moment's escape from a grim reality. This kindness is not sentimental. It is intensely practical. It is the understanding that the person you help today may be the only one willing to help you tomorrow. It is a recognition of your shared fate, a silent pact made between people who have been forgotten by the world. It is the logic of the lifeboat. To survive, you must row together. And so, people endure. They fall in love amidst the squalor. They get married. They have children. They celebrate small victories. They find reasons to laugh, sharing dark, grim jokes that only they could understand. They sing lullabies to their babies over the noise of the factory. They are not just victims of their circumstances. They are resilient, tough, and stubbornly human, clinging to their dignity with a tenacity that the city can never quite extinguish. As you lie in the dark, the memory of a small kindness from your day comes to you. An older man at the factory, seeing your struggle, showed you a slightly better way to hoist the baskets, to ease the strain on your back. It was a tiny thing, a moment's instruction that cost him nothing, but it was a spark. It was a reminder that you are not just a cog in a machine, but a person, seen by another. And holding on to that small, warm thought, you finally feel the pull of sleep, a brief surrender in a war that will begin again at dawn. The first hint of gray light seeps through the grimy window, signaling the start of another day. The routine is the same, a grim ballet of waking, dressing, and preparing to face the world. As you chew on a hard crust of bread, your mind drifts to a place you can see but never touch, a city that exists alongside your own but in a completely different universe, the London of the rich. Occasionally, you catch a glimpse of it, a gleaming carriage pulled by two magnificent horses thunders past, its wheels splashing a wave of mud and filth that soaks your trousers. You never see the occupant, hidden behind a pristine glass window and a velvet curtain, but you can feel their presence, a silent, powerful force moving through your world without ever being a part of it. You see them stepping out of shops in the West End, dressed in fine wools and silks, their faces clean, their postures straight, their expressions untroubled by hunger or fear. You try to imagine their lives, piecing together a fantasy from rumors and fleeting observations. They live in grand townhouses with more rooms than your entire tenement building has families. They have servants to cook their meals, clean their homes, and draw their baths with hot, clean water. Their days are not filled with toil, but with social calls, theater outings, and leisurely walks in green parks, far from the smoke and soot of your neighborhood. Their children learn French and play the piano, their biggest worry, a forgotten piece of homework, not where their next meal will come from. In their world, your existence is a distant, abstract problem, if it is considered at all. The prevailing view among the wealthy is that poverty is not a consequence of low wages or bad luck, but a symptom of moral failure. The poor, they believe, are poor because they are lazy, or foolish with money, or too fond of the gin palace. It is a comforting belief, one that absolves them of any responsibility and allows them to enjoy their immense privilege with a clear conscience. This thinking divides the poor into two distinct categories, the deserving and the undeserving. The deserving poor are those who have fallen on hard times through no fault of their own. A respectable widow, an honest worker, disabled in an accident. They might be deemed worthy of a small handout from a church or a charitable society. You, and millions like you, are considered the undeserving. You are able to work, and so your poverty is seen as your own failing. For you, there is no charity, only the grim, looming threat of the workhouse. The idea of climbing out of your station is a laughable fantasy. You were born into this class, and you will die in this class. Hard work does not lead to wealth. It leads to survival for one more day. The entire system is built to maintain the status quo, to keep the laboring masses in their place, providing the cheap manpower that fuels the empire's great engine. The ladder of social mobility is missing all its lower rungs. The city itself is a map of this great divide. You live in the East End, a sprawling, chaotic landscape of factories, docks, and crowded slums. It is the home of industry and poverty. The West End, with its wide, clean streets, grand squares, and manicured parks, is the domain of the wealthy, the powerful, and the aristocratic. The two Londons rarely interact, except for the daily migration of the poor into the West End to serve the rich as their maids, coachmen, and laborers. You finish your bread and stand up, your body already aching in anticipation of the day's work. The other London, the comfortable London, feels as distant and unreal as a fairy tale. The thought of it does not inspire you to dream, for what is the point of dreaming of the impossible? It simply reinforces the cold, hard fact of your reality. Your place is here, in the grime and the struggle. And as you step out the door, you leave the fantasy behind and walk back into the only London you will ever truly know. On your daily walk to the factory, your route takes you past a building that looms larger and darker than any other. It is a vast, imposing structure of brick and slate with high walls, barred windows, and a single, heavy gate. It looks like a prison, and in many ways, it is. This is the Union Workhouse, the place of last resort for the city's destitute. The mere sight of it sends a chill down your spine and makes you quicken your pace. It is the physical embodiment of failure, and its shadow hangs over every poor soul in London. The workhouse operates on a simple and brutal principle known as less eligibility. This means that the conditions inside are intentionally designed to be worse than the life of the poorest, most miserable laborer outside its walls. It is not meant to be a refuge. It is meant to be a deterrent. It is a place so feared, so stripped of dignity and hope, that people will do almost anything, starve, beg, steal, to avoid ending up there. It is the ultimate threat, the final punishment for the crime of being poor. You have heard the stories of what happens when a family, broken and defeated, finally seeks entry. The first thing they do is separate you. Husbands are sent to the men's ward, wives to the women's ward, and children are taken to a separate dormitory. This is not an accident. It is a deliberate policy designed to break the family unit, to demoralize, and to ensure that the workhouse never becomes a comfortable or desirable place. You might only be allowed to see your spouse or children for an hour or two a week, under the watchful eye of a stern official. Once inside your own clothes, the last remnants of your identity are taken from you. You are given a coarse, ill-fitting uniform of rough-spun cloth, the same worn by every other inmate. You are no longer a person with a name, but a pauper, an anonymous resident of the institution. Your hair might be cropped short to prevent lice. Every trace of your former life is systematically erased, replaced by the rigid, impersonal routine of the house. The work is monotonous, grueling, and often deliberately pointless. For men, it might be the stone yard, where you sit for hours with a heavy hammer, breaking large rocks into small, uniform pieces for road construction. Or it could be picking oakum, the mind-numbing, finger-shredding task of unraveling old, tarred ropes into fibrous threads. For women, the work is endless laundry, scrubbing floors, or sewing sacks. The labor is designed not for production, but to crush the spirit. The food is just as bleak. The diet is a repetitive cycle of thin, watery gruel, dry bread, and perhaps a small lump of cheese or a weak broth. It provides just enough calories to keep you alive and able to work, but it is never enough to make you feel full or nourished. Meals are often eaten in silence in a large, cold hall under the gaze of the workhouse master. Every aspect of your life, from when you wake to when you sleep, is controlled by the ringing of a bell. To enter the workhouse or to go on the parish is to suffer a complete social death. It is to admit to the world that you have failed, that you are incapable of supporting yourself. The stigma is so immense that many would rather face starvation in their own homes than surrender their freedom for a bowl of gruel. The workhouse is a place where hope goes to die, a human warehouse where the poor are stored away, hidden from the sight of respectable society. You hurry past the grim, silent building, not daring to look at it for too long. The fear of that place is a powerful motivator. It is what drives you into the dangerous factory each morning. It is what makes you accept the pitiful wages and the crushing labor. Because, as terrible as your life is, you are still free, and in a world with so little that one single thing, your freedom, is the most precious possession you have. The factory gate remains shut today, a sign on it declaring a temporary closure due to a broken steam engine. For the owners, it is an inconvenience. For you, it is a disaster. A day without work is a day without pay, and a day without pay is a day closer to utter destitution. With a heavy heart, you turn your feet towards the last great hope for a casual laborer, the docks. You join the river of other desperate men, all flowing towards the city's great artery, the River Thames. As you get closer, the air changes. The familiar smell of coal smoke begins to mingle with new, strange scents. The sharp temps of salt, the heavy odor of tarred rope, the damp, earthy smell of the river mud, and the faint, exotic aromas of spices, tea, and tobacco from unseen cargo holds. You arrive at the docks to a sight of bewildering chaos. A dense forest of masts and rigging from sailing ships, and the smokestacks of new steam vessels pierce the sky. The noise here is different from the factory. It is a human sound of 1,000 shouting voices in a dozen languages, the creak and groan of wooden hulls, and the rhythmic chanting of men hauling heavy loads. This is where the wealth of the British Empire flows into London, and you are here to beg for a tiny piece of it. You join a large crowd of men gathered in a semicircle around a foreman, a brutal daily ritual known as the Callan. The foreman, perched on a crate, scans the sea of faces, his eyes looking for the strongest, most able-bodied men. He points, calling out a few names, or just gesturing towards men he recognizes. Those chosen surge forward, their faces a mixture of relief and grim acceptance. The rest, including you, are left behind, another day's hope dashed in a single moment. You watch the chosen men get to work, and it is a brutal sight. They are tasked with unloading the ships, carrying immense loads on their backs. Sacks of sugar, weighing over 100 pounds, heavy barrels of rum, massive crates of goods from every corner of the globe. They move in a steady line from the ship's deck, down a narrow, treacherous gangplank, and into the cavernous warehouses that line the docks. The work is punishing. The risk of a fall or a crushing injury is constant, and the pay is for just a few hours' labor. Your gaze drifts out to the river itself. It is not a calm waterway, but a crowded, frantic, highway. Great ships from America, India, and China are moored in the center, while a swarm of smaller boats buzzes around them. You see the lightermen, skilled boatmen in flat-bottomed barges, transferring cargo from the large ships to the wharves. You see small passenger ferries, called wherries, darting between the banks, and the occasional police boat patrolling the chaotic waters. The river is the city's beating heart, pumping goods and people through its system relentlessly. And there are those who make their living from the river's filth. From the bank, you can see the dredgermen in small boats, using long-handled nets to scoop up bits of coal that have fallen from the barges. This dredged coal, wet and muddy, can be dried and sold, or used to heat their own homes. And on the muddy banks at low tide, the mudlarks are already at work, sifting through the toxic sludge for anything of value. The river provides, but it only gives up its treasures to those willing to brave its filth. The river is a source of life, but it is also a constant source of death. Men fall from slippery gangplanks and are swallowed by the cold, murky water. The strong currents can pull a person under in seconds, and even if you can swim, the raw sewage and industrial pollution in the water mean that a mouthful is often enough to bring on a fatal disease. The same river that brings the empire's wealth also serves as a vast, unmarked graveyard. You stand for a long while watching the ceaseless activity, a ghost at the feast of global commerce. The riches of the world are here. You can smell them, see them, almost touch them, but they are not for you. With your pockets empty and your stomach aching, you turn your back on the river. A day without work means a day of uncertainty. You must now find another way to survive until the sun sets. You turn away from the docks, the noise and activity fading behind you, replaced by a hollow feeling in the pit of your stomach. A day without work. The words echo in your mind, a death knell for the hope of a meal tonight. The city, which felt like a place of brutal opportunity just an hour ago, now feels like an enormous, indifferent trap. Your only task now is to navigate the hours until you can return to your tenement without having spent a single penny you do not possess. You wander aimlessly through the labyrinth of streets, becoming just another anonymous figure in the great shuffling crowd. The city is a constant performance of commerce and survival. You pass vendors of every kind, their cries and calls a constant chorus. A woman sells limp-looking watercress from a basket. A man with a handcart offers dubious-looking meat pies, their greasy smell both tempting and nauseating. You see a pure finder, one of the city's most wretched workers, carefully collecting dog manure from the streets to sell to the local tanneries who use it in the leather-making process. The street is also a stage for those trying to earn a living through entertainment. On one corner, a man with a barrel organ grinds out a repetitive, wheezing tune, while a small, sad-eyed monkey in a red felt jacket holds out a tin cup. Further on, a family of acrobats has drawn a small crowd, the children tumbling on a worn piece of carpet, while the father passes a hat. You listen for a moment to a patterer, a man who sells cheap, printed ballads about recent murders or scandals, often by singing the lurid headlines in a dramatic, mournful voice. You drift past the public houses, the smell of stale beer and sawdust spilling out from their swinging doors. Through the grimy windows, you can see men nursing a single pint for hours, seeking refuge from the cold or the loneliness of their lives. The pub is the working man's parlor, a place of warmth and community that is strictly off-limits to you today. You cannot afford even the cheapest glass of gin, so you can only watch from the outside, a ghost at the window. The streets are alive with children, but they are not playing. They are working with a fierce, desperate energy. You see the crossing sweepers with their brooms, darting into the path of wealthy pedestrians. You hear the newsboys, their voices shrill as they shout the day's headlines. A little girl, her face pinched and old-looking, tries to sell a wilted bouquet of flowers to a passing lady who waves her away with an irritated flick of her wrist. Their struggle is a constant, heartbreaking backdrop to the city's rhythm. Even being idle is a risk. You have to keep moving, to look as if you have a destination. If you stand still for too long, you risk attracting the attention of a constable on his beat. A man with no work and no money is a vagrant in the eyes of the law, and vagrancy is a crime. An arrest could lead to a short spell in prison, or worse, a sentence to the workhouse. You are not free to simply rest. Your poverty makes you a permanent suspect. As the hours crawl by, hunger becomes a constant, gnawing companion. Your eyes are permanently scanning the gutters and the ground, no longer just for hazards, but for anything that might be of value. A dropped coin, a discarded apple core, a bit of rope, anything that can be eaten, sold, or used. You are now a scavenger, sifting through the city's refuse, your dignity a luxury you can no longer afford. The day stretches on, a long, empty expanse of time filled with nothing but walking and watching. You feel invisible, a meaningless speck in a city that does not care if you live or die. The sun begins its slow descent, and a new anxiety begins to creep in. Another night is coming, and with empty pockets and an empty stomach, the darkness feels more threatening than ever. As the last of the daylight bleeds from the sky, the city's gas lamps flicker to life, painting the streets in a sickly yellow glow. A cold wind sweeps through the alleys, and the reality of your situation becomes stark and terrifying. A day without work means no money for the rent on your family's room. You cannot go back. Tonight, you are homeless. The immediate, desperate goal is no longer finding food, but simply finding shelter from the bitter cold and the dangers of the night. Your mind races through the grim options available to the city's destitute. The most common refuge is a common lodging house, known colloquially as a doss house. For a few pence, you can get a bed, or at least a small patch of floor space, in a large, foul-smelling dormitory. You picture the scene, dozens of men packed together on lice-infested mattresses, the air thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, cheap gin, and disease. Theft is rampant. You would have to sleep with your boots for a pillow and your hands in your pockets to guard the nothing that is in them. These houses are filled with a transient population of society's forgotten souls. You would share the room with beggars, petty thieves, out-of-work laborers, and families who have been evicted from their homes. It is a place of coughing, snoring, and muttered nightmares, a temporary warehouse for human despair, where the only rule is to pay your pence and cause no trouble. It offers a roof, but it offers no safety and no peace. If you only have a single penny to your name, you might find your way to a penny sit-up. This is an even more wretched establishment. For your coin, you do not get a bed. You get a spot on a hard wooden bench in a crowded, heated room. The rule is simple. You can sit up all night, but you are not allowed to lie down. It is shelter from the elements, nothing more. You would spend the night in a state of semi-conscious misery, surrounded by dozens of others slumped in exhausted heaps. A grim variation on this is the two-penny hangover. In these places, a rope is stretched across the room, and for 2 pence, you are allowed to lean over it to sleep. It is a marginal improvement on the bench, offering a slightly more restful posture. The proprietor's wake-up call is brutally efficient. In the morning, he simply unties one end of the rope, sending all the sleeping bodies tumbling onto the dirty floor. For those with a little more money, perhaps 4 pence, there is the 4-penny coffin. This sounds macabre, but it is considered a luxury by the homeless. It is not a real coffin, but a simple wooden box, large enough for one person to lie down in. It is filled with a bit of straw for comfort, and you might be given a tarpaulin sheet for a blanket. The wooden sides offer a small measure of privacy and, more importantly, protection from the thieves who prowl the dormitories at night. It is a dark, claustrophobic, and lonely way to sleep, but it is safe. But all these options require money, and you have none. The final, terrifying alternative is to sleep rough. This means finding a sheltered doorway, a hidden corner in a churchyard, or a spot under the arches of a bridge. It means sleeping exposed to the bitter cold, the rain, and the constant threat of being robbed, attacked, or arrested by a constable for vagrancy. It is a night spent in constant fear, with one eye open, where sleep is not a release, but a dangerous vulnerability. You stand at a street corner, the wind cutting through your thin coat. The warmth and noise of a nearby pub feel like a scene from another world. You have no pennies. The doss houses, the sit-ups, the coffin beds, they are all locked away from you. A cold dread spreads through your body as you accept the inevitable. Tonight, the alleys will be your bedroom. Tonight, the shadows will be your only blanket. The city's energy begins to wane, but the darkness brings with it a more predatory silence. Your search for a place to rest begins. You move away from the gaslit main streets, plunging into the deeper, more absolute darkness of the back alleys. You are looking for a place that offers two things: shelter from the biting wind, and concealment from the eyes of the law and the city's other nocturnal hunters. Every doorway is assessed, every pile of crates a potential shield. You pass under the arch of a railway bridge, where other huddled shapes are already settled for the night, their forms barely distinguishable from piles of rags. There is no room for you here. You move on, your footsteps echoing unnervingly in the quiet. Finally, in a narrow alley behind a bakery, you find a small recess, a shallow space between a brick wall and a stack of empty, foul-smelling barrels. It is not much, but it is out of the main thoroughfare. This will have to be your bed for the night. You slide into the space, curling yourself into a tight ball on the cold, damp cobblestones. The ground is hard and unforgiving, and a foul, stagnant puddle is just inches from your head. You pull the collar of your thin coat up around your neck and tuck your hands into your armpits, a futile attempt to preserve what little body heat you have. But the cold is a relentless enemy. It seeps up from the stone, through the thin fabric of your clothes, and into your very bones. A deep, uncontrollable shiver begins to rack your body. Lying there, you listen to the secret symphony of the city at night. You hear the distant, lonely chime of a church clock striking the hour. You hear the skittering claws of rats exploring the rubbish pile nearby. A burst of drunken singing erupts from a pub 2 streets away, then is abruptly cut off. Later, you hear the slow, heavy tread of a constable on his beat, his footsteps echoing closer and closer. You hold your breath, making yourself as small as possible, until the sound fades away into the distance. Every sound is a potential threat. Hunger, which was a dull ache during the day, now becomes a sharp, twisting pain in your empty stomach. The cold seems to amplify it, making it impossible to ignore. You close your eyes and try to think of anything else, but your mind conjures images of hot meat pies, steaming potatoes, and thick slices of bread and butter. The fantasy is so vivid it is almost a form of torture. You press your arms against your stomach, as if the pressure could somehow quiet its desperate cries. Sleep is impossible. You drift in a state of hypervigilant exhaustion, a shallow doze from which any sound can startle you awake. You are suspended in a state of constant fear. The fear of being discovered by the police and dragged to the workhouse. The fear of another homeless man, more desperate than you, who might try to steal your boots or your coat. The fear that you might fall into a deep sleep and simply never wake up, another forgotten soul lost to the cold. The hours crawl by with an agonizing slowness. You mark the time by the chiming of the distant clock. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. The night feels like an eternity, a vast, cold ocean you must swim across. Your body is numb, your mind is dull with fatigue, but still, you cling to consciousness. To sleep is to surrender, and you are not ready to surrender yet. Finally, after what feels like a lifetime, you notice a subtle shift in the darkness. The absolute black of the sky begins to soften into the faintest shade of charcoal gray. A new day is being born. You have survived the night. It is a victory, but it comes at a terrible cost. You are more exhausted, colder, and hungrier than you were when the sun set. You have won the battle against the night, but now, stiff and shivering, you must gather the strength to face the war of the coming day. The dawn arrives not as a bright, hopeful glow, but as a slow, reluctant dilution of the darkness. The sky shifts from black to a deep, bruised gray, and the shapes of the city begin to re-emerge from the shadows. You are stiff, your joints ache, and a deep, penetrating cold has settled into your marrow. The first task of the day is not to find work, but to simply erase the evidence of the night, to transform yourself from a homeless vagrant back into someone who might pass for a laborer. You crawl out from behind the barrels, your movements slow and painful. The early morning traffic of workers and delivery carts is already beginning to fill the streets. You must not linger. You pull your filthy coat tight around you and merge into the flow of the city. Just another hunched figure in the morning gloom. Your immediate goal is to find water, not to drink, for you know the dangers, but to wash. Your search leads you to a horse trough, a long stone basin filled with murky, stagnant water for the city's thousands of working animals. It is freezing cold and slick with green algae, but it is your only option. Looking around to make sure no constable is watching, you cup your hands and scoop up the icy water, splashing it on your face. It is a shock to the system, but it cuts through the fog of exhaustion. You scrub at the grime on your cheeks and hands, using your coat sleeve as a rough towel. It is a pitiful attempt at cleanliness, but a necessary one to look even remotely human. With the worst of the filth removed, the gnawing hunger returns with a vengeance. It is a physical pain, a hollow ache that consumes your thoughts. With no money, your options are bleak. You could follow a baker's cart, hoping a loaf might fall. You could linger near the market, your eyes peeled for a discarded, bruised apple or a rotten potato that has been overlooked. Or you could bring yourself to do the most humiliating thing of all, beg. As you wander, a rumor passes through the shuffling crowd of the destitute. A church on the next street is offering free soup. Hope, a dangerous and unfamiliar feeling, flickers within you. You follow the stream of other ragged figures and find a long, silent queue snaking out from a small side door of a grim-looking church. You take your place at the end of the line, your eyes fixed on the door, trying not to think about how many people are ahead of you. Before the soup is served, the church door opens and a stern-faced man in a black coat appears. He proceeds to deliver a long, moralizing sermon on the sins of idleness and the evils of drink, his gaze sweeping over the hungry faces before him. This is the price of charity. You must stand here, cold and starving, and listen to a lecture on your own supposed moral failings. You must look grateful. You must look pious. You must perform your role as the deserving poor. You bow your head and endure it. Finally, the sermon ends and the queue begins to move. You are handed a tin bowl of thin, watery soup with a few pieces of potato and turnip floating in it. It does not look like much, but it is hot, and it is the first food you have seen in over a day. You find a spot on the church steps, away from the crowd, and cradle the warm bowl in your hands, the heat seeping into your frozen fingers. You eat slowly, mechanically, the hot liquid, a balm to your empty stomach. It is not enough to make you feel full, but it is enough to quell the worst of the pain. It is enough to give you the strength to continue. You have survived the night on the street. You have found a meager breakfast. The city has not defeated you yet. With the empty bowl in your hands, you stand up and face the day, ready to begin the desperate hunt for work once more. The warm soup in your belly provides a fragile shield against the cold, a temporary fuel for your body. You set off once more, your mind focused on the singular goal of finding work. Your journey takes you across the city, and as you walk, you become a spectator to the chaotic, pulsing system of London's transportation, the veins and arteries that move its millions of souls. You watch as a horse-drawn omnibus lurches down the street. It is a heavy, double-decker carriage, pulled by two tired-looking horses, its wheels churning the thick mud. Every available inch of it is crammed with people. They are packed tightly inside, clinging to the rails on the open-air top deck, and even standing on the rear ladder. It is the transportation of the masses, a slow, swaying, and uncomfortable way for clerks and shopgirls to get to their jobs. The fare is only a penny or two, but it is a luxury you cannot afford. Then, darting through the slower traffic with terrifying speed, is the hansom cab. It is a sleek, black, two-wheeled carriage, the city's version of a private taxi. The driver sits perched high on a seat at the back, giving him a clear view over the roof. Inside, a wealthy gentleman or a finely dressed lady is shielded from the filth of the street. The hansom cab is a symbol of speed, efficiency, and a level of wealth that allows one to float above the grime that you must wade through. You realize that the true engine of the city is not steam, but the horse. There are tens of thousands of them, their powerful muscles pulling everything from private carriages to heavy delivery drays piled high with goods. Their hooves clatter endlessly on the cobblestones. But this reliance on horsepower has a foul consequence. The streets are covered in manure, a constant, steaming carpet of waste that adds to the city's overwhelming stench and disease. It is a problem so vast that some learned men predict the city will one day be buried under it. Your walk brings you to the edge of a vast, gaping wound in the earth. It is a massive construction site, a muddy, chaotic trench cut directly through a line of buildings. This is the future, the new underground railway. You stand and watch thousands of laborers, known as navvies, swarming over the site. They are digging the great tunnels by hand, with shovels and pickaxes, their bodies slick with sweat and mud. It is brutally hard and dangerous work, with the constant risk of tunnel collapses and accidents. These navvies are a breed apart, known for their immense strength, their thirst for beer, and their nomadic lifestyle, following the railway lines as they spread across the country. They are paid better than factory workers, but their life expectancy is shorter. To join them would be to enter one of the most perilous trades in the city, a gamble of your life for a few extra shillings a week. You try to imagine what it will be like when it is finished. Great steam locomotives, breathing fire and smoke, running in tunnels deep beneath the city streets. You have heard people talk of it with a mixture of wonder and terror. They say the carriages are dark, the noise is deafening, and the tunnels are filled with a sulphurous, choking steam from the engines. It is a new kind of travel, a journey into a man-made underworld, a modern marvel and a modern hell. You stand at the edge of the great pit, watching the navvies toil below. The city is being torn apart and rebuilt, reshaped by iron and steam. This railway is a monument to progress, built on the backs of thousands of anonymous men risking their lives in the dark. For them, it is a job. For you, it is another potential chance. You watch them, weighing the terror of the work against the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. Perhaps you think they might need another pair of hands. Desperation is a powerful force, strong enough to shove aside fear. You approach the edge of the great construction pit, find a man who looks to be in charge, a foreman with a weathered face and a loud, gravelly voice, and ask for a day's work. He gives you a single, dismissive glance, up and down, sizing you up not as a person, but as a collection of muscles. Without a word, he just gestures with his thumb towards a pile of shovels. You have been hired. You are now a navvy. You descend a rickety wooden ladder into the great trench, and the world above vanishes. Down here, it is a chaotic realm of mud, sweat, and noise. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and human exertion. The trench is a sheer-sided canyon of brown London clay, held back by a precarious-looking skeleton of timber beams. Above you, primitive, steam-powered cranes creak and groan as they lift wagons of excavated earth out of the pit. The sound is a constant, deafening roar of men shouting, iron grinding, and the rhythmic thud of 100 pickaxes striking the ground. Your job is brutally simple. You dig, you join a line of men carving away at a wall of clay, your shovel sinking into the heavy, wet earth with a sucking sound. The moment your shovel is full, you heave the contents into a wooden wagon, then immediately strike the earth again. The pace is relentless, set by the foreman's bellowing commands. There are no breaks. To pause for even a moment is to invite a stream of curses and the threat of being sent away without pay. Your muscles, still aching from yesterday's imagined factory work, scream in a new, more profound agony. This work is far more dangerous than the factory. The timber shoring that holds back the tons of earth above you groans and shifts. You hear stories from the other men about recent cavins, of workers buried alive under sudden landslides of clay and gravel. Men slip and fall from the muddy scaffolding, and the heavy equipment overhead can drop a load of timber or rock without warning. There is no safety gear, no concept of it. Your only protection is your own vigilance and a healthy dose of luck. Yet, there is a different spirit here. In the factory, the workers were silent, isolated automatons. Here, among the navvies, there is a rough, boisterous camaraderie. They are a tribe of men, many from Ireland or the English countryside, bound together by the shared danger and the pride they take in their immense strength. They tell crude jokes, sing bawdy songs, and work with a fierce, competitive energy. They look out for each other in the trench, shouting warnings and sharing swigs of water from a common flask. The pay for this brutal labor is better than a factory wage, a key reason why men are drawn to it. But you learn that the wages are often paid out at the end of the week in a nearby pub, a place specially set up by the construction company. A large portion of a man's hard-earned money disappears down his throat in the form of beer and gin before he even makes it home. A system that keeps even these better-paid workers trapped in a cycle of poverty. At the end of the long day, a bell signals the end of the shift. You can barely stand. Your hands are a mess of raw, bleeding blisters. Your back feels as if it has been broken and crudely reset. You are covered from head to toe in a thick, cold layer of mud, your own sweat having mixed with the London clay to form a second skin. You have never known an exhaustion so complete, so bone-deep. You collect your pay, a few shillings that feel heavier and more precious than any coins you have ever held. It is enough for a proper meal. It is enough for a bed in a doss house tonight. It is enough to feel for a fleeting moment like you have one. But as you climb out of that great dark pit and back into the fading light of the city, you look at your torn hands and feel the profound ache in your bones. You wonder how many days like this a man can survive before the work itself buries him. You stand on the pavement, caked in mud, every muscle in your body screaming in protest, but in your hand you clutch a small pile of coins. It is the heaviest, most beautiful thing you have ever held, a day's wage from the railway trench. Suddenly, the city at night transforms. The dark, threatening alleys seem less menacing. The glowing windows of the cookshops and public houses are no longer symbols of a world you cannot enter. They are invitations. For the first time in what feels like a lifetime, you have choices. Your first priority is a simple one: food. Not the thin, watery soup of charity, but a real, solid meal that you can buy with your own hard-earned money. You find a small cookshop, its window steamy and opaque, a sign outside promising hot meat pies. You step inside, the warmth and savory smell of cooked meat and gravy enveloping you. You hand over a few pence and are given a hot, greasy pie and a pile of fried potatoes wrapped in a piece of newspaper. You find a quiet doorway, sit down, and eat like a starving wolf. The taste is glorious. The hot, savory filling burns your tongue, but you barely notice. It is the taste of victory, the taste of having labored and been rewarded. With a full stomach and a few pence still in your pocket, the lure of the pub becomes irresistible. You push open the swinging doors of a nearby tavern and are hit by a wave of warmth, noise, and the thick, sweet smell of stale beer and pipe tobacco. The room is crowded, the floor covered in sawdust to soak up spills. A low ceiling, stained dark by smoke, hangs over a room full of working men, their loud conversations and occasional bursts of laughter, a stark contrast to the weary silence of the factory. You make your way to the bar and order a pot of beer. The barman slides a heavy pewter tankard toward you, filled with a dark, frothy liquid. You take a long, deep drink. It is bitter and heavy, but it feels wonderful. You find an empty corner and sit on a stool, nursing the drink, feeling the day's chill slowly recede, replaced by a pleasant, spreading warmth from the alcohol and the heat of the crowded room. This is the working man's sanctuary. Here, for a short while, they can forget the foreman, the factory, and the filth. They are not laborers or paupers. They are men, sharing stories, arguing about politics, and placing small bets on boxing matches. In a corner, a man starts to sing a sad, sentimental ballad, and soon the whole room joins in, their voices rough but full of emotion. It is a community forged in shared hardship, a place where the crushing weight of the city is lifted for a few hours. You know the danger here. It would be easy to order another beer, and then another, to let the warm haze of alcohol dissolve your worries until your pockets are empty once more. You see men at the bar doing just that, drinking away their wages, their brief respite turning into the source of tomorrow's sorrow. With a will of iron you did not know you possessed, you drain the last of your tankard, give a nod to the singing men, and walk back out into the cold night air. Your final purchase of the night is shelter. You make your way to a doss house, but you walk past the common room. Tonight, you can afford a luxury. For 4 pence, you buy a coffin bed. The proprietor leads you to a long room filled with wooden boxes lined up in neat rows. He points to an empty one. It is yours for the night. It is not much, a cramped wooden box with some straw and a rough blanket, but it is everything. You climb into your small wooden haven. The sides block out the sight of the other men and muffle the sounds of their coughing and snoring. You are shielded, you are private, you are safe. With a full stomach, a body warm from beer, and a solid roof, or at least a lid, over your head, you feel a sense of security that is profoundly unfamiliar. For tonight, you have not just survived, you have lived. You close your eyes and fall into the deep, dreamless sleep of the truly exhausted. You awaken in the dark, wooden confines of your coffin bed. For a moment, you are disoriented, but then the memory of the previous day returns. The navvy work, the wages, the hot meal, the pot of beer. Your body is a tapestry of aches and pains, but for the first time in a long while, you do not feel the gnawing emptiness of hunger or the bone-deep chill of sleeping on the street. You have had a brief taste of a better life, and it gives you the strength to face another day in the trench. As you walk through the awakening city, your perspective has shifted slightly. With the immediate terror of starvation held at bay, you notice more than just the filth and the struggle. You see the city's pulse, its relentless rhythm of work, but also its desperate, vibrant search for diversion. For even in a life of grinding poverty, the human soul craves a story, a laugh, a moment of escape. You pass a grimy shopfront, its windows blacked out. A crude sign painted above the door advertising a penny gaff. You have heard of these places. They are cheap, unlicensed theaters, often set up in basements or abandoned stores. For a single penny, you can pack into a hot, crowded room and watch short, lurid plays with titles like The Murder at the Red Barn. The acting is melodramatic. The sets are a couple of painted backdrops. But for the city's poor, it is a chance to be transported, to witness tales of passion, betrayal, and justice, however crudely performed. Further on, in a secluded back alley, you see a small, rough crowd gathered in a circle, their faces alight with a grim excitement. You know what this is. It is one of the city's illegal blood sports. It might be a dogfight, or more likely, rat baiting, where a terrier is thrown into a small pit with 100 rats, and men place bets on how quickly the dog can kill them all. It is a brutal, savage spectacle, fueled by gambling and cheap gin, a dark and violent release for men living dark and violent lives. Your mind drifts to the ultimate public spectacle, one that thankfully has become less common in recent years, a public hanging. You have heard your father talk of them. The execution of a notorious criminal was treated as a public holiday. Massive, carnival-like crowds would gather, with vendors selling pies and gin. People would rent rooms with a view of the gallows. It was a morbid, state-sanctioned piece of theater, a stark and brutal reminder of the law's power. But not all entertainment is so grim. You remember the rare joy of a traveling fair setting up on a patch of common ground. The air would be filled with the sound of steam organs, the shouts of men running games of chance, and the screams of people on rickety, hand-cranked rides. It was a fleeting, magical world of light and noise, a brief explosion of color in a life of gray. And in the evenings, there are the music halls, which began as simple sing-alongs in the back rooms of public houses. A man at a piano, a singer on a small stage, and a room full of people joining in on the chorus of a popular, often sentimental or bawdy song. For the price of a drink, you could be part of a community, your voice joining 100 others in a moment of shared, boisterous joy. You reach the edge of the great railway trench, and the sounds of the worksite pull you back to your reality. The city's desperate, often brutal, search for entertainment fades into the background. You realize that all of it, the plays, the songs, the savage sports, are all just different ways of trying to forget. They are brief, flickering candles against an overwhelming darkness. You take a deep breath, pick up your shovel, and descend once more into the mud, ready to earn your own small spectacle of a hot meal and a safe bed. For 6 days, the city roars. On the 7th, it holds its breath. It is Sunday, the day of rest mandated by law and by God. The great railway trench is silent. The factory chimneys are still, and a strange, muted quiet settles over the streets. For you, this day is a paradox, a welcome relief from back-breaking labor, but also a day with no possibility of earning a wage. It is a day for contemplation, and everywhere you look, the city's soul is on display. From all across London, the church bells begin to ring. You hear the deep, resonant boom of St. Paul's Cathedral, a sound that seems to speak of power and permanence. You see these great churches as you wander, vast Gothic structures of stone and stained glass. They are monuments to an England of wealth and tradition, but they feel cold and distant. You imagine them filled with the city's elite, men in fine suits and women in elegant dresses, sitting in their private pews, their expressions serene and pious. It is a world you cannot enter. Your local parish church is more modest, but it still feels like a place apart. The vicar is a gentleman, well-educated and well-meaning, but his sermons about spiritual duty and moral fortitude seem to float high above the heads of his impoverished congregation. He speaks of a God of order and propriety, a God who seems to have little to say about the gnawing hunger in your belly or the damp that seeps through the walls of your tenement. For many, attending church is a social obligation or a necessary performance to remain eligible for the vicar's charity. But there is another kind of faith alive in the streets, a faith with more fire and passion. In simple, unadorned halls, in rented rooms, and even on street corners, the nonconformist preachers hold their services. The Methodists, the Baptists, and the new, fervent soldiers of the Salvation Army. Their preachers do not speak in learned phrases. They shout, they plead, they tell stories in the language of the common man. Their hymns are not the quiet, stately tunes of the parish church, but loud, emotional songs of suffering and redemption, sung with a desperate, heartfelt energy. For many of the city's poor and forgotten, these chapels are the true centers of their community. Here, you are not judged for your ragged clothes. Here, your voice can join with others in a powerful chorus that for a moment drowns out the misery of the world outside. These chapels provide more than just spiritual guidance. They offer a support network, a temperance society to help fight the lure of the gin palace, and a powerful sense of shared identity and belonging in a city that works so hard to make you feel anonymous and alone. Yet, religion is not only a source of comfort, it is also a source of profound fear. The idea of hell is not a metaphor. It is a literal, terrifying place of fire and eternal damnation. Preachers use vivid, frightening imagery to paint a picture of the fate that awaits the sinner. For a person already living a life of earthly suffering, the added weight of potential eternal torment is a heavy burden to bear. The fear of God is as powerful a force as the love of God, and charity is almost always tied to faith. The soup kitchen, the blanket distribution, the meager assistance offered to widows and orphans, it all comes with the expectation of piety. You must listen to the sermon. You must attend the prayer meeting. You must publicly repent for your sins before you are deemed worthy of a loaf of bread. It is a system of spiritual accounting, a way for the wealthy to control the morals of the poor, even as they offer them relief. You find yourself standing at the edge of a small crowd gathered around a Salvation Army band. A woman is giving her testimony, her voice raw with emotion. Some in the crowd weep with her. Others, like you, watch with a kind of weary detachment. The promise of salvation in the next world feels like a faint echo, when the struggle for survival in this one is so loud. The day of rest is a welcome pause, but tomorrow the city will roar back to life, and you will need more than faith to earn your daily bread. The Sunday of rest passes, and Monday morning arrives with the familiar promise of toil. But something is different today. The usual gray light of dawn is absent, replaced by a strange, heavy darkness. When you step outside, the air is unnervingly still, and the fog that usually haunts the mornings is thicker, denser, and has a sickly yellow-brown tinge. By mid-morning, it is clear this is no ordinary mist. A great smog is descending upon the city. It rolls in not like weather, but like an invading army, a thick, greasy, and acrid cloud that swallows the city whole. By noon, the world is plunged into an unnatural twilight, a darkness so profound that the gas lamps must be lit in the streets, but their weak, flickering flames do little to pierce the oppressive gloom, creating small, isolated bubbles of light in a city that has gone blind. The sun has not just been hidden, it has been erased. You have seen fog before, but this is a different beast. This is a pea-souper of the worst kind, a perfect storm of nature and industry. A weather phenomenon known as a temperature inversion has created a lid over the city, trapping a layer of cold air beneath a layer of warmer air. All the smoke from London's millions of coal-burning chimneys, with no way to escape, has been pressed down into the streets, mingling with the natural fog to create a thick, toxic, breathable poison. Getting to the work site is a near impossible task. You cannot see the end of your own arm, let alone the other side of the street. The world becomes a confusing soundscape of muffled shouts, unseen obstacles, and the terrifyingly close clatter of a horse and cart whose driver is as blind as you are. People become lost just feet from their own front doors. The city's relentless rhythm grinds to a halt as traffic becomes hopelessly snarled and drivers abandon their vehicles in the middle of the road. The physical effects are immediate and brutal. Your eyes sting and water relentlessly from the sulfurous air. Your throat feels as if it has been scraped raw, and every breath is a painful, shallow gasp that seems to offer no oxygen. A deep, hacking cough racks your body, a cough that you hear echoed by countless others, hidden in the gloom. The smog has a taste, a foul, metallic, chemical flavor that coats your tongue and makes you feel sick. This disorienting darkness is a gift to the city's criminal element. Footpads and pickpockets can operate with near total impunity. A person can be robbed, attacked, and disappear into the fog before a cry for help has even left their lips. People hurry from one pool of gaslight to the next, their senses on high alert, trusting no one. Many simply give up, barricading themselves indoors, stuffing rags into the cracks around windows and doors, in a futile attempt to keep the suffocating air at bay. But this is more than just an inconvenience. It is a public execution. The smog is a killer, preying on the most vulnerable, the elderly, the infants, and anyone with a weak chest or lungs, which in this city is nearly everyone, begin to succumb. The constant chorus of coughing deepens, joined by the slow, mournful tolling of funeral bells, a sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The doctors are helpless. The city is choking to death. You find yourself trapped, a prisoner, in a city of smoke. The worksite is closed, but your tenement room offers little protection. The smog seeps in through the floorboards, under the door, and through the window frame, a small, suffocating bubble of existence. There is nothing to do but wait, to breathe as shallowly as possible, and to pray for a wind that will come and tear this deadly shroud from London's face. After 2 days of suffocating darkness, you awaken to a sound you had forgotten, the sound of wind rattling the window pane. A draft, cold and fresh, is cutting through the stale air of the room. You stumble to the window and scrape away a patch of grime. For the first time in days, you can see the brick wall of the building opposite. The great smog is breaking. A sense of profound, exhausted relief washes over you. The city has survived. You venture outside, along with thousands of others, emerging from your homes like creatures from a long hibernation. The air is still thick with the familiar smell of coal, but it no longer feels like a solid wall. You can breathe again without every gasp being a painful, choking effort. People blink in the pale, watery sunlight, their faces pale and drawn from their ordeal. A fragile, weary silence hangs over the streets, the silence of a city collectively catching its breath. But the ordeal is not over. The smog has left its mark, a filthy black fingerprint on every surface. A greasy, sooty film covers the buildings, making the brickwork look even darker and more forbidding. The streets are coated in a slick, black slime. You see a woman weeping as she takes down her laundry, which she had hung to dry indoors, only to find it stained a uniform dingy gray by the invading smoke. The city feels as though it has been submerged in an inkwell and has only just resurfaced. Then, the true cost begins to reveal itself. The sound of coughing has not subsided, but now it is deeper, more ragged, and it is joined by another sound, the slow, steady, and frequent tolling of funeral bells. You see small, sad processions making their way to the cemeteries. You hear of neighbors who did not make it through, an elderly man in the room below, an infant on the floor above. The newspapers will soon print the official figures, the tally of the dead rising by hundreds, even thousands, above the weekly average, all claimed by what the doctors will call bronchitis or pneumonia. The smog's deadly reach extended beyond just the human population. You hear stories from the men who work at the markets. At Smithfield, the great livestock market, prize cattle brought in for sale were found dead in their pens, having choked to death on the same toxic air that plagued the city's people. The smog was an indiscriminate killer, a vast, poisonous blanket that spared nothing that needed to breathe. Yet, despite the filth and the death, the city returns to life with a shocking, almost brutal, speed. Within hours, the factory chimneys begin to belch out their familiar black smoke once more. The navvies return to the railway trench. The omnibuses and carts clog the streets. The great, smoke-producing engine of London whirs back to life, seemingly having learned nothing. The cycle of pollution begins anew, as if the past few days were just a bad dream. There is no great public outcry, no demand for reform. This is seen as the price of living in the greatest city in the world. These killer fogs are viewed as a natural disaster, like a flood or a harsh winter. Terrible, tragic, but ultimately unavoidable. It is the cost of industry, the price of empire. A grim, fatalistic acceptance settles over the population. This is London. This is life. You pull your coat around you and join the stream of workers heading back to their jobs. The memory of the suffocating darkness, the fight for every single breath, is still fresh in your mind. You look up at the smoke already beginning to gather in the sky, and you know, with a chilling certainty, that it will happen again. The Great Smog was not a singular event, it was just a dress rehearsal. You are back in the rhythm of work, whether it is the monotonous clang of the factory or the rhythmic thud of your pickaxe in the railway trench. You work alongside other men, their faces grim with effort. But as you listen to their speech between gasps for breath, you hear accents that are not of London. You hear the soft, lilting tones of Ireland and the guttural, unfamiliar sounds of Eastern Europe. You are not alone in your struggle. You are surrounded by strangers who have come to this city seeking refuge, only to find a different kind of hardship. The most numerous are the Irish. They have poured into London by the tens of thousands, fleeing a great famine that left their own land barren and their families starving. They came here seeking work and bread, but found themselves crammed into the city's most wretched slums, often a rung even lower on the social ladder than the English poor. They are seen as fierce competition for the most brutal jobs at the docks, on the construction sites, and are often met with suspicion and contempt. They are stereotyped as dirty, drunken, and violent, a foreign menace in the heart of the empire. You see them in their neighborhoods, ghettos of profound poverty where the Gaelic tongue can still be heard. Their communities are held together by a shared history of suffering and a deep, abiding Catholic faith that sets them apart from the Protestant majority of England. They are strangers in a strange land, their longing for the green fields they left behind, a constant, unspoken sorrow that hangs in the smoky air. Later in the century, another wave of immigrants arrives, fleeing a different kind of horror. They are the Jews of Eastern Europe, escaping the violent pogroms and persecution of the Russian Empire. They arrive at the London docks with nothing, often not even speaking the language. Their only possessions, the clothes on their backs, and a desperate hope for a life free from terror. They too settle in the crowded East End, creating a vibrant, close-knit community in the heart of the slums. They often find work in trades that they can practice among themselves, particularly tailoring. You see the sweatshops, small, cramped workshops, where entire families, men, women, and children, hunch over sewing machines for 16 hours a day, stitching clothes for a pittance. Their lives are governed by their own customs, their own Sabbath, and their own language, Yiddish. They build their own synagogues, their own schools, and their own mutual aid societies, creating a world within a world to protect themselves from the hostile city outside. These newcomers are met with the same fear and prejudice as the Irish. They are accused of lowering wages, of bringing strange diseases, of being insular and untrustworthy. Their foreign tongue, their different dress, their unfamiliar religion, it all marks them as the other, a convenient scapegoat for the city's many problems. The native Londoner, struggling to survive, often sees these immigrants not as fellow sufferers, but as rivals in the brutal competition for existence. But as you work beside an Irish navvy, his face set in the same mask of exhaustion as your own, or as you pass a Jewish sweatshop and see the weary slump of a tailor's shoulders, you realize the absurdity of it all. The accent may be different, the God they pray to may have a different name, but their hunger feels the same as yours. Their muscles ache with the same pain. Their fear of the workhouse, of sickness, of a day without pay is your fear. In the great, churning, indifferent machine of industrial London, the distinctions of nationality and religion begin to feel meaningless. The city is a great and terrible leveler. It does not care where you were born. It only cares if you have the strength to do the work. You are all just fuel for its fires, and you all turn to ash in the same way. The smoke that rises from the chimneys makes no distinction. It chokes you all equally. The day's work is done. You are walking home through the familiar, dusky streets, your body a symphony of aches. A recent rain has left the cobblestones slick and has filled the street's many potholes with murky, brown water. As you step around a particularly large puddle, you happen to glance down and catch your own reflection. For a moment, you do not recognize the person staring back at you. The face in the water is thin and smudged with the grime of the city, a mixture of soot, clay, and sweat. The eyes are hollow, set deep in their sockets, and they hold a weariness that seems ancient, far older than your actual years. The skin is pale from a lack of sun, and the mouth is set in a hard, neutral line. This is the face of a stranger, yet you know it is your own. It is the face that London has given you, a mask of perpetual endurance carved by hardship. You stare at this reflection and see the sum of your days. You see the cold awakening in the crowded room, the taste of stale bread, the choking fog of the morning. You see the desperate search for work at the factory gate or the dockside column. You see the long hours of brutal, mind-numbing labor, your muscles screaming, your spirit shrinking. You see the dangerous walk home through the gaslit shadows and the brief, troubled sleep before the cycle begins all over again. It is a life measured not in years, but in the turning of a merciless wheel. Your body, you realize, has become a tool. It is no longer a source of pleasure or comfort, but a machine that must be maintained just enough to function. Food is fuel, sleep is repair. Every movement is calculated to conserve energy. Pain is not a warning to be heeded, but a constant low-level hum in the background of your existence, a signal that the machine's parts are wearing down. You are a biological engine, and your only purpose is to produce another day's labor. And what of your mind, your spirit? You find that the capacity for strong emotion has been worn away. Hope is a dangerous luxury that leads only to disappointment. Despair is a bottomless pit, too exhausting to indulge in. What remains is a quiet, profound numbness, a state of being where the highest ambition is to simply get through the day without disaster. You do not wish for happiness, you only wish for the absence of acute suffering. You look up from the puddle at the city around you. Everywhere there are signs of progress. The new railway cutting through the earth, the grand buildings reaching for the sky, the immense wealth flowing through the docks. This is the great, celebrated age of invention and empire. But you feel utterly disconnected from it. You are not a participant in this progress. You are the raw material for it. The city's grandeur is built upon the foundation of your anonymity and your toil. And yet you endure. You think of what makes a good day. A good day is finding work. A good day is not being injured. A good day is earning enough for a hot meal and a dry place to sleep. A good day is not having to watch a family member cough up blood. These are the small, pathetic triumphs that your world has been reduced to. They are the tiny glimmers of light that keep you from being completely swallowed by the darkness. You look away from your reflection and continue your walk home. The face in the water is a stark reminder of what you have become. You are not a person with dreams and ambitions. You are a survivor in this vast, uncaring city that is the only title you can claim. Your purpose is singular, to wake up tomorrow and do it all again. And in the heart of the empire, that is a victory in itself. And so, we return to the question that has haunted every step of this journey through the grime and the gaslight. After the endless days of toil, the nights of shivering cold, a constant, low-level hum in the background of your existence, a signal that the machine's parts are wearing down. You are a biological engine, and your only purpose is to produce another day's labor. And what of your mind, your spirit? You find that the capacity for strong emotion has been worn away. Hope is a dangerous luxury that leads only to disappointment. Despair is a bottomless pit, too exhausting to indulge in. What remains is a quiet, profound numbness, a state of being where the highest ambition is to simply get through the day without disaster. You do not wish for happiness. You only wish for the absence of acute suffering. You look up from the puddle at the city around you. Everywhere there are signs of progress. The new railway cutting through the earth, the grand buildings reaching for the sky, the immense wealth flowing through the docks. This is the great, celebrated age of invention and empire, but you feel utterly disconnected from it. You are not a participant in this progress. You are the raw material for it. The city's grandeur is built upon the foundation of your anonymity and your toil, and yet you endure. You think of what makes a good day. A good day is finding work. A good day is not being injured. A good day is earning enough for a hot meal and a dry place to sleep. A good day is not having to watch a family member cough up blood. These are the small, pathetic triumphs that your world has been reduced to. They are the tiny glimmers of light that keep you from being completely swallowed by the darkness. You look away from your reflection and continue your walk home. The face in the water is a stark reminder of what you have become. You are not a person with dreams and ambitions. You are a survivor in this vast, uncaring city that is the only title you can claim. Your purpose is singular, to wake up tomorrow and do it all again. And in the heart of the empire, that is a victory in itself. And so, we return to the question that has haunted every step of this journey through the grime and the gaslight. After the endless days of toil, the nights of shivering cold, the constant threats of hunger, disease, and violence, how does one actually survive Victorian London? The answer, you come to realize, is as complex and grim as the city itself. It is not a single secret, but a brutal, exhausting art form, the art of not dying. First, you must understand that survival is not about thriving. It is not about improving your station, building a better future, or finding happiness. These are the dreams of a different class, a different world. To entertain such hopes is a waste of precious energy. Survival is about one thing, and one thing only: seeing the sun rise tomorrow. It is a daily, desperate, and all-consuming battle, and the only prize for winning is the chance to fight again. Survival is a matter of physical endurance. It is the strength in your back to haul the cotton, the resilience in your lungs to withstand the smog, the fortitude in your stomach to digest the questionable food. It is possessing a body that can withstand 14 hours of labor, fueled by little more than bread and weak tea, and still have the energy to walk home. It is the sheer dumb luck of having a constitution that can fight off the consumption, the cholera, and the fevers that call the weak around you like a scythe through wheat. It is also a battle of the mind. It is the ability to build a wall inside your head, to shield yourself from the relentless onslaught of misery that would otherwise drive you mad. It is the cultivation of a strategic numbness, an emotional callus that prevents the daily horrors from touching your core. It is the grim willpower that forces you out of your straw bed on a cold, dark morning when every fiber of your being screams for you to just give up. Survival demands a certain moral flexibility. The clear lines between right and wrong, so easily drawn in the warm parlors of the wealthy, become hopelessly blurred in the slums. It is the wisdom to know when to be invisible, when to lower your eyes to avoid trouble, and when a stolen loaf of bread is the only thing standing between your family and starvation. It is a pragmatism born of desperation, where the only true sin is to let your children go hungry. Survival means learning the city's secret rhythms. It is knowing which factory gate is most likely to offer a day's work, which pub has the cheapest beer, which alley is a known haunt of footpads, and which church offers soup in exchange for a sermon. It is a deep, instinctual knowledge of the city's underbelly, an unwritten map of its dangers and its few, precious opportunities. It is an education learned, not in a schoolhouse, but in the university of the street. And finally, you realize survival is rarely a solitary endeavor. It is the neighbor who shares a bit of coal, the fellow laborer who warns you of the foreman's approach, the shared warmth of a crowded pub, the collective voice raised in a hymn in a tiny chapel. It is the fragile, unspoken web of mutual support, the understanding that your neighbor's survival is intrinsically linked to your own. In a city that isolates, community is a radical act of defiance. There is no easy formula. To survive here is to be lucky, to be strong, to be cunning, and to be connected. It is to win a daily lottery against impossible odds. It is a life of constant attrition, where the only goal is to remain standing when so many others have fallen. So our journey comes to an end. We have walked the muddy, gaslit streets, breathed the smoke-filled air, and felt the bone-deep chill of a London that is now lost to history. We have stood in the shadow of the factory and the workhouse, and we have witnessed the quiet, desperate struggle for survival that was the daily reality for millions. The world we have just visited is a foreign country, one of hardship and squalor that seems almost unimaginable from the comfort of our modern lives. Think, for a moment, of the world you inhabit, the clean water that flows from your tap, the light that appears at the flick of a switch, the warmth that fills your home without choking you with smoke, the medicine that can cure an infection in days, and the social safety nets designed to catch you if you fall. These are the mundane miracles of our age, miracles that the people of our story could not have even conceived of in their wildest dreams. It is easy to ask the question, could I have survived that? And the honest answer, for most of us, is almost certainly no. Not because we are weaker, but because we are different. We are the products of a world that has largely shielded us from such raw, relentless hardship. The specific, brutal resilience required to endure that life, the physical fortitude, the mental numbness, the instinctual cunning, is not something we have ever been forced to develop. And so, the purpose of this journey is not to congratulate ourselves on the progress we have made, or to feel a morbid thrill at the suffering of the past. It is to remember. It is to honor the lives of those anonymous millions who were the fuel for the industrial age. They were not simply statistics in a history book. They were people. They loved, they hoped, they feared, and they endured. They built the modern world on their backs, and their reward was often little more than an early grave. But their struggle, as terrible as it was not entirely in vain. The very horrors we have explored, the rampant disease, the deadly pollution, the brutal exploitation of workers and children, eventually planted the seeds of change. The fight for clean water, for safe housing, for workers' rights, for public health, and for a more compassionate society grew directly from the fertile ground of their suffering. Our world is built not only on their labor, but on the lessons learned from their pain. And now it is time to leave them to their rest. Let the sounds of Victorian London fade away, the clang of the factory bell, the clatter of iron wheels on cobblestone, the endless chorus of coughing. Let it all dissolve back into the mists of time. Feel the hard floor beneath you soften, the cold air warm, and the grimy darkness of the tenement recede, replaced by the quiet comfort of your own room. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of the 19th century. If you have found value in this exploration of the past and wish to support our continued efforts to bring these stories to light, please consider subscribing to Medieval Nocturnes. May your own night be filled with peace, and may your dreams be far gentler than the reality we have just witnessed. Sleep well,